In the quiet moments just before daybreak, imagine yourself about to embark on an extraordinary journey. This is not simply a quest for information or entertainment, but a genuine invitation to step into the most compelling teachings Jesus gave the world. Today, we're exploring an array of parables that have shaped hearts for centuries, often quietly, yet powerfully. These ancient stories, told in simple language, carry within them the life-changing seeds of faith, forgiveness, and renewal. By staying with us until the very end of this video, you'll encounter timeless wisdom and discover new ways to see yourself, see others, and perhaps even see the world in a more hopeful light. These parables, including classics like the parable of the sower, the Good Samaritan, and the prodigal son, remain fiercely relevant, even in our modern, fast-paced era. At first glance, they may sound like distant old-world tales, but each carries a universal truth that touches upon our deepest human longings. For instance, consider the sower who scatters seed on various types of soil. It's a perfect image of our own hearts and how we respond differently to opportunities, challenges, and above all, God's love. Then there's the story of a woman who loses a single coin but searches persistently until she finds it, reminding us that we each have immeasurable worth, no matter how lost or overlooked we feel. These are not minor narratives to breeze through. They're signposts guiding us toward reflection, compassion, and an attitude of readiness for life's big questions. But parables aren't just moral lessons. They are keys to unlocking a deeper kingdom reality, one in which forgiveness is always an option, second chances are abundant, and spiritual readiness truly matters. When Jesus first shared these stories, some listeners were intrigued, others were challenged, and a few walked away uneasy because it confronted their mindset. Today they remain just as provocative and stirring. Our goal is to weave them into a cohesive journey, one in which you can reflect on your own story, where you've come from, where you're going, and how you might sow seeds of faith that will bear fruit for years to come. Throughout this video, we will not only revisit the text of each parable, but also uncover fresh perspectives and personal applications to help you live out these teachings in your day-to-day life. Expect poignant takeaways and stirring reflections, coupled with a vibrant storytelling style. In other words, by choosing to stay until the very end, you're setting yourself up for a powerful shift in how you read Scripture and how you engage with the deeper questions of life. You'll encounter examples of people who have found hope where there seemed to be none, who have been forgiven when all appeared lost, and who have discovered the hidden treasure of faith. Also, if you resonate with the message, we encourage you to drop a comment about which parable impacts you most, or which part of your life you feel most challenged to change. Share your thoughts, your questions, or even your testimonies. This kind of engagement can spark lively discussion and shape our future exploration together. In a time when the world is hungry for genuine hope and clarity, these insights can ripple out far beyond this single moment. So let's journey onward, step by step, parable by parable, open to whatever revelation might be waiting. The stories aren't complicated, but their implications can upend our assumptions, shift our priorities, and usher us into a place of gratitude and wonder. Get ready for an immersive, heart-stirring adventure into Jesus' most powerful lessons. The parable of the sower, we see a figure scattering seeds without discrimination, letting them fall on hardened paths, rocky ground, thorny patches, and good fertile soil. It's a simple enough image, but it speaks volumes about the varied conditions of our hearts. Some of us experience moments of receptivity, times when we're open to new ideas, spiritual growth, or a challenge that draws us to mature. Other times we're more like the hardened path, distracted, jaded, or closed off by past hurts and disappointments. What's most striking is that the seed itself never changes in potency. It's the heart that determines the harvest. If we imagine each seed as God's word or a moment of truth in our lives, how often do we let that truth take deep root? Do we nurture it, water it with prayer and thoughtful reflection, or let life's busyness and worries choke it out? Each layer of this parable resonates in some way with our modern lives. We chase careers, social media updates, and endless entertainment, sometimes forgetting the essential need to guard our hearts against the thorns that threaten to suffocate what matters most. Yet there's a hopeful note. Even in less than ideal situations, seeds can still sprout. A bit of sunshine, a bit of patience, and the seed can transform into something we never thought possible. One fresh insight here is that we have the responsibility to prepare our own soil. Yes, we can pray for understanding, but we also must act. We can weed out destructive habits, dedicate time to meaningful reflection, and keep the environment of our hearts receptive to greater truths. When we do this, even one small seed can yield an abundant harvest, sometimes 30, 60, or 100 times what was sown. In other words, it takes only a single turning point, a single acceptance of truth, to create a chain reaction of positive growth in our lives and in the people around us. Imagine that moment of the day when you finally sit down, perhaps exhausted from work or studies, and you decide to devote just 10 minutes to reading a passage of scripture or meditating on gratitude. That might feel like a tiny seed, but it could be the start of an entirely new chapter. So don't underestimate these small steps. God works wonders through them. If you've ever felt like your past is too rocky or your anxieties too thick, remember that the potential for new life still resides in every seed. Let this parable encourage you to prepare your inner garden carefully, with consistent acts of faithfulness. We want this video to be a spark, a tool to help you cultivate that good soil. And if you find yourself wishing you had more support or more insight, consider reaching out to someone who has walked a similar path, whether a mentor, a spiritual leader, or an online community of believers and thinkers. Sometimes all it takes is honest dialogue to break up the hardened ground in our hearts and get those seeds growing. Our hope is that as you learn from these parables, you'll embrace a season of growth that not only impacts you, but also radiates to those you love. Let these insights inspire you to share the video, start conversations, and collaborate in building a culture where hearts are receptive to truth. Is the parable of the prodigal son, a story about a father and two sons that spans rebellion, regret, and reconciliation. In ancient times, a son demanding his inheritance early was tantamount to wishing his father dead. Yet that is precisely what the younger son does. He demands, he leaves, and he squanders everything on empty pleasures. When famine strikes and desperation sets in, he's forced to feed pigs, a humiliating turn for someone from a Jewish background. In that lonely place, he realizes he's hit rock bottom and resolves to return home, hoping only to be a hired hand for his father. This moment of returning is loaded with emotion. We watch him trudging back, possibly rehearsing his apology, weighed down by guilt and shame. Yet the father, seeing him from afar, runs to him, something men of stature in that culture typically wouldn't do. This action underscores the father's extravagant love, the kind of love that refuses to be dignified or hold grudges. He restores the son fully, dressing him in fine garments and throwing a party that announces to everyone, "My child was dead but is alive again." We might think that's the end of the story, but there's the older brother too. He's outraged, bitter that his sibling is being honored after such irresponsible behavior. The father pleads with him to join the celebration, but we see a hardness in the older son's heart. He's always followed the rules, so why should the irresponsible one get rewarded? This parable reminds us that both the rebellious and the self-righteous can be equally distant from the Father's heart. The rebellious might turn away seeking worldly thrills, while the self-righteous might secretly harbor resentment or pride. The Father's wide-open arms, however, extend to both, and that is the heart of God's grace. Modern psychology might call it unconditional positive regard, but in the context of the Christian faith, it's divine mercy that transcends our limited understanding of fairness. A new insight we can draw here is how the Father's love is never scarce. Some older interpretations suggest the older brother simply feared there wasn't enough love or blessing to go around. But love, in its highest form, isn't a finite commodity. If you've ever felt you missed out because you tried so hard to do things right while watching others seemingly get second chances easily, this parable may nudge you to consider that we're not in competition for God's favor. If you're the one returning after many mistakes, know that there's a robe and a ring waiting, along with an embrace that has no memory of your past. It's an invitation to let go of guilt or jealousy and embrace the fullness of love. In the hustle and bustle of daily life, family tensions or personal regrets can make us feel like either the prodigal or the older sibling. Let this parable bring healing. Let it remind you that your worth isn't determined by your past or by how many spiritual boxes you check off. Like that father standing on the porch, scanning the horizon, God's mercy is constant, welcoming, and free. As we press on through the rest of these parables, hold on to this vision of radical love. It might just reshape how you see your own relationships and bring a fresh wind of compassion into how you treat others. The parable of the mustard seed, one of the shortest yet most powerful lessons on how faith can blossom from the smallest beginnings. Jesus describes the mustard seed as tiny, almost invisible in the palm of your hand. Yet, when planted, it grows into a sprawling plant that offers shelter even to birds seeking a place to nest. This is a reminder that genuine faith can start quietly, perhaps as a single prayer uttered in doubt, or a small act of kindness that feels insignificant. Over time, nurtured by consistent action and hope, that faith can branch out in ways we never imagined. In an era where people crave overnight success, instant fame, or miraculous transformations without the process, the mustard seed parable feels refreshingly honest. Growth takes time. We water our faith with prayer, reflection, and honest humility. Sometimes we don't see changes for a while, yet faith, like that seed, has a life of its own, fueled by the Spirit of God, quietly working beneath the surface. If you've ever felt discouraged because your spiritual journey seems slow, or you find yourself doubting whether those small daily efforts matter, remember the potential locked within a mustard seed. A single spark of hope can light up an entire household, an entire friendship circle, or an entire online community. But it doesn't stop at personal growth. As the mustard seed grows into a plant big enough for birds to nest, our faith expands in its impact. That is a call to stewardship, urging us to ask, how can I create a welcoming environment for others? How can I offer shelter, compassion, or guidance so others feel safe to grow and belong? Perhaps it's checking in on a friend during tough times, volunteering at a local food drive, or simply being available to listen without judgment. Interestingly, Jesus followed the mustard seed parable with the image of leaven in dough, something that works silently but permeates the entire batch. Faith and love are contagious. The more we let them take root in our heart, the more they'll penetrate every corner of our lives and communities. This quiet, transformative work might appear slow, but it's unstoppable once it begins. You don't have to broadcast every act of kindness on social media for it to matter. Often the real kingdom impact happens behind the scenes, growing steadily like dough rising in a warm kitchen. So maybe you'll look at your talents, your relationships, or your opportunities differently this week. Consider them as seeds or yeast, tiny, but with infinite potential. Don't be afraid to start small. Send that text encouraging someone. Offer a prayer for a neighbor. Begin that volunteer project, even if it's just an hour a week. Like the mustard seed, each small step, cultivated in faith, can result in a harvest that becomes a refuge for many. That's how Jesus' kingdom grows, one small act of love at a time, eventually spreading its branches far and wide to create an environment where life thrives. The parable of the Good Samaritan, a story that can still ignite conversation about compassion, prejudice, and real-world mercy. In Jesus' narrative, a man traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho falls victim to brutal thieves who rob and beat him, leaving him half dead by the roadside. Two individuals, one a priest and the other a Levite, both recognized religious figures, encounter the wounded man and pass him by, consumed by their own concerns or fearful of ritual defilement. Then comes a Samaritan, a person despised by most Jews of that era, who sees the man and is moved with compassion. He tends to the victim's wounds, places him on his own donkey, and pays for his care at an inn. This show of mercy from an unexpected source turned the social order on its head. People would have expected the priest or the Levite to help, not the Samaritan. Jesus thus redefines neighbor not as someone sharing your lineage, beliefs, or social standing, but as anyone in your path who needs help. In a modern sense, we can apply this to any situation where we see someone in need. The question is, do we walk past, perhaps leaving a superficial note on social media, or do we stop and get involved? The Good Samaritan risked time, money, and personal safety. Today, we might not face thieves on a wilderness road, but we do face countless moments when a friend, a co-worker, or even a stranger needs care, and we hold back because we're busy, tired, or afraid of getting entangled in problems we can't fix instantly. Yet authentic compassion often demands we step outside our comfort zones. One fresh angle on this parable is the question of what happens after the Samaritan leaves. He's provided funds and asked the innkeeper to continue caring for the victim. This collaboration hints at how community effort is essential for lasting impact. We don't have to do everything alone. We can mobilize friends, family, and resources to see that someone recovers. In a digital age, this could look like crowdsourcing medical bills, offering emotional support in a group chat, or connecting someone in crisis to professional counselors. Perhaps the biggest takeaway is the transformative power of empathy that crosses cultural, religious, or ideological lines. We live in a polarized world where it's easy to see the other side as an enemy or threat. The Samaritan's example breaks down that barrier. True compassion disregards labels and sees only the shared humanity in need of kindness. Next time you see a comment section blow up in hostility or watch the news highlight yet another social divide, remember that the call to go and do likewise transcends all boundary lines. It's about stepping into someone else's suffering, bridging gaps, and planting seeds of reconciliation, no matter how small they initially appear. This is the kind of radical love that can go viral if we dare to practice it daily. Imagine the ripple effects if each person who watched this video made a habit of looking for roadside opportunities to show mercy. That's the heart of this parable, and perhaps the truest measure of spiritual vitality, not just in words but in actions that restore dignity and hope. When we do this, we embody the very kingdom values Jesus spent his earthly ministry revealing. Parable of the workers in the vineyard, a narrative that challenges our notions of fairness and generosity. A landowner goes out in the early morning to hire laborers, agreeing on a standard daily wage. Later, he hires more workers at different times of the day, mid-morning, noon, even late afternoon. When evening arrives, every worker receives the same wage, sparking outrage among those who started at dawn. How could those who worked fewer hours get paid as much as we did? At face value, this seems unfair. But Jesus uses the story to illuminate how God's generosity often surpasses our human understanding of equity. We might feel we deserve more recognition because of how long or how diligently we've served, whether that's in ministry, community work, or just day-to-day responsibilities. Yet the parable underscores that all who come into the vineyard, regardless of when they arrive, are valued equally. It's a reminder that we do not ultimately earn God's favor by the length or intensity of our service. Grace doesn't operate like a time clock. An innovative way to look at this is to see the landowner's actions as an invitation to celebrate others' blessings rather than resenting them. Could it be that there's a deeper joy in seeing someone new experience that first taste of God's grace, even if we've been around for decades? Sometimes we might get trapped in the mindset of seniority, wanting our long-standing commitment to translate into preferential treatment. But spiritual growth isn't a corporate ladder. That said, this parable doesn't minimize hard work or faithfulness. The question is more about the attitude behind our service. Are we in it for the sheer joy of participating in something divine, or are we fixated on what we think we're entitled to? The earliest workers were paid exactly what was promised. The conflict only arose when they noticed others receiving the same pay for fewer hours. In our lives, how often do we sense envy or frustration because we compare ourselves to others? The impetus is to shift from comparison to gratitude, trusting the landowner's generosity. In an online community, where we might see someone's ministry or brand explode in popularity overnight, or a co-worker get recognized unexpectedly, this parable invites us to celebrate, not grumble. Maybe it's a new believer who leaps forward in understanding and spiritual passion, while we've been here for years feeling overlooked. The vineyard story calls us to cheer them on, confident that our own service hasn't gone unnoticed by the one who truly matters. So next time you see someone else being blessed, try resisting that twinge of jealousy. Instead, lean into gratitude for the many ways God has already provided for you. It's a radical mindset shift in a culture often driven by competition. Each of us has a role in the vineyard, and every moment spent laboring there has meaning. Let's hold on to that truth and find joy in the fact that in God's kingdom, newcomers, latecomers, and long-time faithful are all welcomed with open arms and equal grace. Is the parable of the unjust judge, also known as the parable of the persistent widow. Here we see a widow appealing repeatedly to a judge who neither fears God nor respects people. She demands justice against her adversary. The judge initially ignores her, but because she keeps pestering him, he finally grants her request. Jesus uses this unlikely scenario to teach about persistence in prayer and the certainty that God hears the cries of his people. But notice the stark contrast. The judge is unjust and indifferent, yet he concedes to the widow to get her off his back. Our Heavenly Father, on the other hand, is good and caring. If even an uncaring judge can be persuaded by persistence, how much more will a loving God respond? Yet we might still ask, why do I have to pray repeatedly if God already knows what I need? One insight is that prayer is not about wearing God down. It's about nurturing our relationship with Him, about persevering in faith even when answers aren't immediate. We might add a contemporary layer to this parable. The widow goes viral with her pleas. Imagine her posting daily updates on social media, rallying public sympathy, or gathering signatures. The unstoppable force is her faith-driven persistence. In our own contexts, we can be persistent not only in prayer, but in advocating for justice for the oppressed. Sometimes a cause needs voices that keep speaking, keep showing up, until those in power have no choice but to pay attention. Jesus ends this parable with a striking question. When the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth? This isn't meant to guilt-trip us, but to highlight how easily we can lose heart or become cynical. Faithful persistence is key, especially in a world filled with broken systems and personal disappointments. God's timeline often stretches beyond our immediate gratification, but that doesn't mean He's ignoring us. If you find yourself on the edge of losing hope, maybe you've prayed for a loved one's health or a breakthrough in your personal struggles, this parable encourages you to hold on. Keep asking, keep seeking, keep knocking. And while you wait, don't forget that spiritual growth is happening. You're building endurance and learning to see God's goodness even when circumstances are tough. Sometimes in that waiting, the greatest miracle occurs within us. So yes, share your prayer requests, gather supportive friends, and maintain that unyielding trust. The widow's determination was fueled by her certainty that she deserved justice. As children of God, we have an even stronger premise. We have a Father who is just, loving, and moved by our petitions. Keep that in mind, and let your voice be heard with unwavering faith, both in the quiet of your own heart and in the fellowship of others who stand with you in prayer. Also known as the 10 bridesmaids, we encounter a strong message about spiritual readiness. In the story, 10 young women await the arrival of the bridegroom. 5 bring extra oil for their lamps, while the other 5 do not. When the bridegroom is delayed, everyone falls asleep. At midnight, the call rings out. The groom is here. It's time to join the wedding feast. But the 5 without extra oil find themselves unprepared, frantically rushing off to buy more, only to return and find the door shut. It's a poignant image about being vigilant, not in a sense of never resting, but in maintaining a heart prepared for God's timing. Life rarely unfolds exactly as we expect, and spiritual readiness means we carry an ongoing supply of faith, hope, and wisdom that sustains us when sudden moments of decision appear. Perhaps it's a crisis in the family, a moral crossroads, or an unexpected opportunity to serve. In those instances, we can't scramble for last-minute faith if we haven't nurtured a relationship with God over time. Some new perspectives on this parable revolve around community. The 5 prepared bridesmaids couldn't simply give their oil away. Some interpret that detail as illustrating that personal faith and spiritual capacity are not commodities you can just transfer. Each person must cultivate faith individually. However, that doesn't mean we can't encourage each other, remind each other, or even gently nudge each other about the spiritual disciplines that keep our lamps burning. In a close-knit group of friends or in a church community, accountability can help us stay alert. Another interesting angle is that the bridegroom's delay tests the bridesmaid's patience. So much in the Christian journey involves waiting for direction, waiting for God's promises to unfold, waiting for answers to prayer. The question is, how do we wait? Do we let our spiritual reserves dwindle because we get bored, distracted, or discouraged? Or do we keep adding oil through prayer, study, fellowship, and acts of kindness? It's often in these long stretches of waiting that our character is formed most deeply. Ultimately, the closed-door scene sends a jolt of urgency. Now is the time to ensure we're prepared, not later. If we keep putting off spiritual growth or keep ignoring that quiet prompting in our heart, we might miss pivotal opportunities. This parable might feel daunting, but it's also empowering. We are invited to take ownership of our faith journey, to prioritize a connection with God that's steady enough to see us through the darkest midnight. That way, when the call rings, we'll be ready, lamps shining brightly, to step into whatever banquet hall God opens before us. Lost sheep. Jesus depicts a shepherd who leaves 99 sheep safely in the fold to seek out the one that wandered astray. In practical terms, leaving 99 to search for one might seem risky, even illogical. But this parable showcases the unrelenting love God has for each individual. No one is disposable, and no situation is too far gone. We've all had times we strayed, whether through bad choices, apathy, or life circumstances that distanced us from faith. The powerful image here is that the shepherd doesn't wait for the sheep to stumble back on its own. He takes the initiative to search the hills and valleys, determined to bring that lost sheep home. And when he finds it, he carries it back, rejoicing rather than scolding it for wandering off. In a modern sense, many of us find ourselves lost in the digital wilderness, caught up in endless scrolling, or weighed down by social expectations that drive us to doubt our worth. The Good Shepherd's pursuit is a counter-narrative. It says, "You matter deeply, no matter how overlooked or stuck you feel." And it's not just an individual rescue mission. When the shepherd returns, there's a celebration. This suggests that communities of faith should also celebrate recovery, reconciliation, and spiritual renewal, not judge or shame those returning from rocky paths. Some might ask, what about the 99 sheep left behind? Don't they matter too? They absolutely do, but they're already safe, at least in the story's setup. The emphasis is on the extraordinary lengths love goes to recover what's lost. It's a call to reflect that same pursuit in how we treat others who have drifted away. Rather than waiting for them to crawl back in regret, we can reach out first, acknowledging that a simple phone call or a thoughtful message might be the moment someone realizes they can still come home. If you find yourself resonating with the lost sheep, hear this loud and clear: you are not a hopeless case. The shepherd is already looking for you, longing to bring you back into fellowship and wholeness. And if you identify more with those in the 99, challenge yourself to cultivate the shepherd's heart for the people around you. Instead of harboring a sense of exclusivity, be part of that welcoming environment when someone strayed returns. This parable highlights that it's not merely about following rules. It's about living in a space where love is on the move, actively seeking, actively healing. Overarching message of these parables. From seeds scattered on various soils to lost coins, from wedding feasts to vigilant bridesmaids, each story invites us to reflect on who we are and who we are becoming in relation to God's kingdom. Through the prodigal son, we saw love that transcends guilt and jealousy. Through the Good Samaritan, we learned compassion that defies cultural barriers. The workers in the vineyard taught us that God's grace is not about our sense of fairness, and the mustard seed reminded us that monumental growth can spring from the tiniest acts of faith. Now, as a final call to action, think about which of these lessons has struck you most personally. Was it the need to forgive or be forgiven? The urge to prepare your heart as fertile soil? The realization that love should cross all lines of division? Or maybe the call to remain persistent in prayer? Wherever you sense the strongest nudge, take a concrete step toward implementing that truth. Don't let it remain a fleeting thought. Let it be the seed that grows into a tangible change in your life. Also, consider sharing your reflections in the comments or directly with a friend. When a message resonates, letting it sit silently often causes it to fade. Voicing it helps reinforce the impact, and you might end up encouraging someone else who's quietly in need of the same revelation. By doing so, you participate in spreading seeds of transformation far and wide, ensuring the messages we've discussed reach beyond this moment in time. We also encourage you to subscribe if you haven't already and to hit that notification bell. This isn't about statistics or growing a brand for vanity's sake. It's because we believe these stories hold timeless truths that our world, often preoccupied with conflict and superficial pursuits, desperately needs. Every share, like, or comment boosts the chance that someone searching for hope or guidance will come across these teachings. As we wrap up, remember that the parables are more than just historical anecdotes. They are live illustrations of a kingdom that's both here and yet to come. They call us to be active participants, to let our hearts become good soil, to love without reservation, and to live in readiness for divine appointments. May these stories continue to speak to you as you reflect on them. May they challenge you to deeper commitment, spark in you an unstoppable hope, and empower you to be a conduit of grace in your sphere of influence. Thank you so much for journeying with us. We pray that you carry these teachings close to your heart and allow them to energize your faith. Whether you've been familiar with these parables since childhood or are hearing them anew, we believe God can use them to draw you into a richer, more authentic experience of spiritual life. Stay tuned for more inspiring explorations of scriptural truths, personal testimonies, and practical guidance for thriving in faith. And never forget, a single seed of truth, planted in a willing heart, can blossom into a harvest of abundant, transformational grace. May you walk forward with renewed purpose, and may these parables continue to light your path.